Pete Hegseth, Donald Trump's choice for defense secretary, has sparked controversy with previous statements envisioning the potential use of U.S. armed forces in domestic political conflicts. He's a former soldier turned Fox News personality. Hegseth is Trump's pick to oversee the Pentagon, which controls the world's largest and most powerful military with $1 trillion budget and 2.5 million employees. Now, compare him to the current Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, a graduate of the U.S. Military Academy at West Point, New York. Austin served 41 years in uniform, retiring as a 4-star Army general after 3 years as commander of the U.S. Central Command. The Defense Secretary oversees the Defense Department and acts as the principal defense policymaker and advisor, and needs to have a broad understanding of the world, of global alliances, and of international diplomacy.
The Army I served would eventually label me as a threat.
I got a call from one of my senior officers saying, "You can stand down. We don't need you." I said, "What do you mean you don't need me? Everybody's going." He said, "No, your orders have been revoked. Don't worry about it. It's cool." The implication is you're an extremist or you're a threat to our unit. If that happened to me, a guy who's on national television, who's got every opportunity to eventually talk about it, imagine how many other guys that happened to. And it did, whether it was vaccine mandates, or whether it was unit stand-downs. People with beliefs, faiths, or creeds that were antithetical to this new woke movement have been shoved out.
In one of his several books, Pete Hegseth suggests that if Democrats win elections, the United States could face a national divorce, during which the military and police will be forced to make a choice, potentially leading to some kind of civil war. His book in 2020, American Crusade, outlines a combative strategy for conservatives, urging them to mock or humiliate or intimidate and crush leftist opponents and to attack first in what he describes as a battle against domestic enemies. Hegseth's rhetoric frequently frames political opponents as existential threats to the United States. He labels progressives, Democrats, and leftists as enemies of freedom and the Constitution, asserting that their influence must be eradicated through a holy war to restore America's founding principles.
There's a reason on the cover that the flag is upside down. It's the universal sign of duress. I talked to dozens and dozens of guys and gals inside the military right now, including my own story, and every single one of them says this is nowhere near the military we had. We used to be focused on meritocracy and lethality, and now it's a social experiment where commanders are walking on eggshells, standards are being lowered, people aren't being held accountable. It's got to change. This is not a book about how the military went woke. It's a book about how the military allowed itself to go woke, and that's the brass and the generals who kowtowed to effectively appointees in the Obama and Biden administration who pushed these things down, and they let it happen, even though they know their job is to defend the meritocracy and the Constitution. So a new commander-in-chief, Donald Trump, can change this quickly by putting a focus back on the right
away.
Hegseth's language bears a striking similarity to the rhetoric of Trump and his surrogates in recent years, suggesting there is a consistent and planned Christian nationalist agenda, and that this new administration is already wedded to the work of Mike Flynn and his Reawaken America tour. Throughout American Crusade, Hegseth paints an apocalyptic vision of American politics, calling for extreme nationalist measures. He encourages conservatives to engage in disruptive actions, such as defying gun-free zones and openly carrying firearms or staging free speech protests in schools. These tactics align with the actions of right-wing activists who, in the aftermath of the 2020 election, increasingly carried weapons to protests and targeted school board meetings with anti-LGBTQ+ and anti-critical race theory agendas. Hegseth explicitly rejects democracy as a principle, accusing people on the left of using the term as a facade for undermining the Constitution. He supports partisan gerrymandering, dismissing fair electoral boundaries as playing nice, and advocating for Republican-led legislatures to draw districts favoring conservatives. The other side is stacked with enemies of freedom, he writes, so we must use every tool available to preserve our values. In the book, he predicts dire consequences if Trump had lost the election. A Biden presidency, he argues, would lead to America's decline, civil unrest, and a potential civil war. Outnumbered freedom lovers will fight back, he writes, suggesting that the military and police, whom he views as aligned with conservative values, would face a difficult choice. It's a horrific scenario that nobody wants, but will be difficult to avoid, he concedes. I just want to interrupt myself for a moment to ask you to support me and independent journalism by becoming an exclusive member of this YouTube channel. You'll receive members-only content, early access to videos, monthly live-streamed Q&As, and much more. It costs just $3 a month for membership, which goes towards helping me grow the channel and create factual, accurate news commentary for those who need it most. Right now, the failures of corporate-owned media and the spread of disinformation and far-right propaganda has made finding authentic news coverage in the US difficult. And with your help, we can have a greater reach, whilst democracy hangs by a thread and the threat of fascism is closer than ever. I'll do my best to put this honest analysis out every day, but I really need your help to do that. If you're watching on a computer, simply click Join directly below or click the Join link in the description to join the 5 Minute News YouTube channel. If you already have a Patreon account, please subscribe at patreon.com/5minutenews. Thank you. Hegseth also ties America's political fate to global power dynamics, claiming that a weakened US would embolden adversaries like China and Islamic extremists. If America is split, freedom will no longer have an army, he warns, positioning the US military as a unique force for Christian, pro-Israel and pro-freedom values. Hegseth's loyalty to Trump is evident throughout his writings. He recounts personal interactions with the former president, including a conversation about Trump's 2019 pardons of service members accused of war crimes. Hegseth describes the moment as a defining compliment from Trump, who reportedly called him a f***ing warrior. Observers have noted Hegseth's alignment with Trump's priorities and his connection to conservative media audiences. Is it any wonder that our allies across the world are concerned? Is it any wonder that NATO is reimagining its future without the support and protection of the United States? Trump said on Wednesday he'd chosen former acting Attorney General Matt Whitaker to serve as U.S. ambassador to NATO. The choice of Whitaker as the nation's representative to the North Atlantic Treaty Organization is an unusual one, given his background is in law enforcement and not in foreign policy. The NATO post is a particularly sensitive one, given Trump's regard for the alliance's value and his complaints that numerous members are not meeting their commitments to spend at least 2% of their GDP on defense, and previously suggested that he'd encourage Russia to do whatever the hell they wanted to countries who didn't pay.
Well, sir, if we don't pay and we're attacked by Russia, will you protect us? I said, you didn't pay? You're delinquent? He said, yes, let's say that happened. No, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want. You got to pay. You got to pay your bills.
Jens Stoltenberg, NATO's Secretary General at the time, said in response to any suggestion that allies will not defend each other undermines all of our security, including that of the US, and puts American and European soldiers at increased risk. Meanwhile, thousands of troops have taken part in drills spanning NATO's eastern flank, including sites in Estonia, Germany, Poland, and Romania just this week. Vladimir Putin has vowed to launch more strikes using an experimental intermediate-range ballistic missile as Ukraine decried the testing of the nuclear-capable weapon on its territory as an international crime. Speaking at a defense conference on Friday, Putin contested U.S. claims that Russia possessed only a handful of the high-speed ballistic missiles, saying the military had enough to continue to test them in combat conditions. Russia launched the experimental missile against a rocket factory in the Ukrainian city of Dnipro. Both Vladimir Putin and U.S. officials have said the missile is capable of carrying a nuclear warhead. With the election of Donald Trump, the world has never felt less safe. I'm Anthony Davis. You can find me on the 5 Minute News YouTube channel and podcast, on Wednesdays co-hosting Uncovered, and on Sunday on The Weekend Show with Midas Touch.